Chapter 49. In his home in Olgiata, Ivo Palazzi was casually looking out the window of his living room when he saw a terrifying sight. Coming up the driveway were Donatella and their three sons. Simonetta was upstairs taking a nap. Ivo hurried out the front door and went to meet his second family. He was filled with such a rage that he could have killed. He had been so wonderful to this woman, so kind, so loving, and now she was deliberately trying to destroy his career, his marriage, his life. He watched Donatella get out of the Lancia Flavia he had so generously given her. Ivo thought she had never looked more beautiful. The boys climbed out of the car and were hugging and kissing him. Oh, how Ivo loved them. Oh, how he hoped that Simonetta would not wake up from her nap. "I come to see your wife," Donatella said stiffly. She turned to the boys. "Come on, boys." "No," Ivo commanded. "How are you going to stop me? If I don't see her today, I'll see her tomorrow." Ivo was cornered. There was no way out. Yet he knew he could not have let her or anyone else ruin everything he had worked so hard for. Ivo thought of himself as a decent man, and he hated what he must do. Not just for himself, but for Simonetta and Donatella and all his children. "You will have your money," Ivo promised. "Give me 5 days." Donatella looked into his eyes. "5 days," she said. In London, Sir Alec Nichols was taking part in a floor debate in the House of Commons. He had been chosen to make a major policy speech dealing with the crucial subject of the labor strikes that were crippling the British economy. But it was difficult for him to concentrate. He was thinking about the series of telephone calls he had received over the past few weeks. They had managed to find him wherever he was, at his club, at his barber, restaurants, business meetings. And each time Alec had hung up on them. He knew what they were asking was only the beginning. Once they controlled him, they would find a way to take over his stock. They would own a piece of a gigantic pharmaceutical company that manufactured drugs of every description. He could not let that happen. They had begun telephoning him 4 or 5 times a day until his nerves were stretched to a breaking point. What worried Alec now was that on this day he had not heard from them. He had expected a call at breakfast, and then again when he had lunch at White's. But there were no calls, and somehow he could not shake off the feeling that the silence was more ominous than the threats. He tried to push these thoughts away now as he addressed the House. "No man has been a stauncher friend of labor than I. Our labor force is what makes our country great. Workers feed our mills, turn the wheels in our factories. They are the true elite of this country, the backbone that makes England stand tall and strong among nations." He paused. "However, there comes a time in the fortunes of every nation when certain sacrifices must be made." He spoke by rote. He was wondering whether he had frightened them off by calling their bluff. After all, they were just small-time hoodlums. He was Sir Alec Nichols, Baronet, MP. What could they do to him? In all probability he would not hear from them again. From now on they would leave him in peace. Sir Alec finished his speech amid vociferous applause from the back benches. He was on his way out when an attendant came up to him and said, "I have a message for you, Sir Alec." Alec turned. "Yes?" "You're to go home as quick as possible. There has been an accident." They were carrying Vivian into an ambulance when Alec arrived at the house. The doctor was at her side. Alec slammed the car against the curb and was out running before it had stopped. He took one look at Vivian's white unconscious face and turned to the doctor. "What happened?" The doctor said helplessly, "I don't know, Sir Alec. I received an anonymous call that there had been an accident. When I got here, I found Lady Nichols on the floor of her bedroom. Her kneecaps had been hammered to the floor with spikes." Alec closed his eyes, fighting off the spasm of nausea that gripped him. He could feel the bile rising in his throat. "We'll do everything we can, of course, but I think you had better be prepared. It's unlikely that she'll ever walk again." Alec felt as though he could not breathe. He started toward the ambulance. "She's under heavy sedation," the doctor said. "I don't think she'll recognize you." Alec did not even hear him. He climbed into the ambulance and sat up in a jump seat, staring down at his wife, oblivious to the back doors being closed, the sound of the siren, and the ambulance beginning to move. He took Vivian's cold hands in his. Her eyes opened. "Alec?" Her voice was a slurred whisper. Alec's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my darling, my darling." 2 men wore masks. They held me down. Broke my legs. I'll never be able to dance again. I'm going to be a cripple, Alec. Will you still want me?" He buried his head in her shoulder and wept. There were tears of despair and agony, and yet there was something else, something he hardly dared admit to himself. He felt a sense of relief. If Vivian were crippled, he would be able to take care of her. She could never leave him for anybody else. But Alec knew that this was not over. They were not finished with him. This was only their warning. The only way he would ever get rid of them was to give them what they wanted, quickly.